conflict must come. I know not what bitterness of conflict must presently come, before the little folks will suffer us to live as we need to live. All the brethren have thought of that. Quasar, of whom I told you, he too has thought of that. They are very little and weak, in their way, but you know all the means of death are in their hands, and made for their hands. For hundreds of thousands of years these little people, whose world we invade, have been learning how to kill one another. They are very able at that. They are able in many ways, and besides, they can deceive and change suddenly. I do not know. There comes a conflict. You perhaps are different from us. For us, assuredly, the conflict comes. The thing they call war. We know it. In a way we prepare for it. But you know, those little people. We do not know how to kill. At least we do not want to kill." "Look!" she interrupted, and he heard a yelping horn. He turned in the direction of her eyes, and found a bright yellow motor car, with dark goggled driver and fur-clad passengers, whooping, throbbing, and buzzing resentfully at his heel. He moved his foot, and the mechanism, with three angry snorts, resumed its fussy way towards the town. "Filling up the roadway!" floated up to him. Then someone said, "Look! Did you see? There is the monster princess over beyond the trees," and all their goggled faces came round to stare. "I say," said another, "that won't do." "All this," she said, "is more amazing than I can tell." "That they should not have told you," he said, and left his sentence incomplete. "Until you came upon me, I had lived in a world where I was great, alone. I had made myself a life, for that. I had thought I was the victim of some strange freak of nature. And now my world has crumbled down, in half an hour, and I see another world, other conditions, wider possibilities, fellowship." "Fellowship," he answered. "I want you to tell me more yet, and much more," she said. "You know this passes through my mind like a tale that is told. You even, in a day perhaps, or after several days, I shall believe in you. Now I am dreaming. Listen!" The first stroke of a clock above the palace offices far away had penetrated to them. Each counted mechanically. 7. "This," she said, "should be the hour of my return. They will be taking the bowl of my coffee into the hall where I sleep. The little officials and servants, you cannot dream how grave they are, will be stirring about their little duties. They will wonder. But I want to talk to you." She thought, "But I want to think too. I want now to think alone, and think out this change in things. Think away the old solitude, and think you and those others into my world. I shall go. I shall go back to-day to my place in the castle, and to-morrow, as the dawn comes, I shall come again, here. I shall be here waiting for you. All day I shall dream and dream of this new world you have given me. Even now, I can scarcely believe—" She took a step back and surveyed him from the feet to the face. Their eyes met and locked for a moment. "Yes," she said, with a little laugh that was half a sob, "you are real, but it is very wonderful. Do you think, indeed— Suppose to-morrow I come and find you, a pygmy like the others. Yes, I must think. And so for to-day, as the little people do—" She held out her hand, and for the first time they touched one another. Their hands clasped firmly, and their eyes met again. "Good-bye," she said, "for to-day. Good-bye. Good-bye, brother giant." He hesitated with some unspoken thing, and at last he answered her simply, "Good-bye." For a space they held each other's hands, studying each the other's face, and many times after they had parted she looked back half doubtfully at him, standing still in the place where they had met. She walked into her apartments across the great yard of the palace like one who walks in a dream, with a vast branch of chestnut trailing from her hand. 3. These two met altogether 14 times before the beginning of the end. They met in the great park, or on the heights, and among the gorges of the rusty-roaded, heathery moorland, set with dusky pine-woods that stretched to the south-west. Twice they met in the great avenue of chestnuts, and 5 times near the broad ornamental water the king, her great-grandfather, had made. There was a place where a great trim lawn, set with tall conifers, sloped graciously to the water's edge, and there she would sit, and he would lie at her knees and look up in her face, and talk, telling of all the things that had been, and of the work his father had set before him, and of the great and spacious dream of what the giant people should one day be. Commonly they met in the early dawn, but once they met there in the afternoon, and found presently a multitude of peering eavesdroppers about them, cyclists, pedestrians, peeping from the bushes, rustling as sparrows will rustle about one in the London parks, amidst the dead leaves in the woods behind, gliding down the lakes in boats toward the point of view, trying to get nearer to them and hear. It was the first hint that offered of the enormous interest the countryside was taking in their meeting, and once, it was the 7th time, and it precipitated the scandal, they met out upon the breezy moorland under a clear moonlight, and talked in whispers there, for the night was warm and still. Very soon they had passed from the realization that in them and through them a new world of giantry shaped itself in the earth, from the contemplation of the great struggle between big and little, in which they were clearly destined to participate, to interests at once more personal and more spacious. Each time they met and talked and looked on one another, it crept a little more out of their subconscious being towards recognition that something more dear and wonderful than friendship was between them, and walked between them and drew their hands together, and in a little while they came to the world itself and found themselves lovers, the Adam and Eve of a new race in the world. They set foot side by side into the wonderful valley of love, with its deep and quiet places. The world changed about them with their changing mood, until presently it had become, as it were, a tabernacular beauty about their meetings, and the stars were no more than flowers of light beneath the feet of their love, and the dawn and sunset the coloured hangings by the way. They ceased to be beings of flesh and blood to one another and themselves. They passed into a bodily texture of tenderness and desire. They gave it first whispers and then silence, and drew close, and looked into one another's moonlit and shadowy faces under the infinite arch of the sky, and the still black pine trees stood about them like sentinels. The beating steps of time were hushed into silence, and it seemed to them the universe hung still. Only their hearts were audible, beating. They seemed to be living together in a world where there is no death, and indeed so it was with them then. It seemed to them that they sounded, and indeed they sounded, such hidden splendors in the very heart of things as none had ever reached before. Even for mean and little souls, love is the revelation of splendors, and these were giant lovers who had eaten the food of the gods. You may imagine the spreading consternation in this ordered world where it became known that the princess who was affianced to the prince, the princess, her serene highness, with royal blood in her veins, frequently met, the hypertrophied offspring of a common professor of chemistry, a creature of no rank, no position, no wealth, and talked to him as though there were no kings and princes, no order, no reverence, nothing but giants and pygmies in the world, talked to him and, it was only too certain, held him as her lover. "If those newspaper fellows get hold of it," gasped Sir Arthur Poodle Bootlick. "I am told," whispered the old Bishop of Frumps. "New story upstairs," said the first footman, as he nibbled among the dessert things. "So far as I can make out, this here giant princess—" "They say," said the lady who kept the stationer's shop by the main entrance to the palace, where the little Americans get their tickets for the state apartments. And then— "We were authorized to deny," said Pickeroon in gossip, and so the whole trouble came about. 4. "They say that we must part," the princess said to her lover. "But why?" he cried. "What new folly have these people got into their heads? Do you know," she asked, "that to love me is high treason?" "My dear," he cried, "but does it matter? What is their right? Right without a shadow of reason, and their treason in their loyalty to us? You shall hear," she said, and told him of the things that had been told to her. "It was the queerest little man who came to me with a soft, beautifully modulated voice, a softly moving little gentleman, who sidled into the room like a cat and put his pretty white hand up so, whenever he had anything significant to say. He is bald, but not of course nakedly bald, and his nose and face are chubby rosy little things, and his beard is trimmed to a point in quite the loveliest way. He pretended to have emotions several times, and made his eyes shine. You know he is quite a friend of the real royal family here, and he called me his dear young lady, and was perfectly sympathetic, even from the beginning. 'My dear young lady,' he said, 'you know you mustn't,' several times, and then, 'You owe a duty.' Where do they make such men?" "He likes it," she said. "But I don't see—" "He told me serious things." "You don't think," he said, turning on her abruptly, "that there's anything in the sort of thing he said?" "There's something in it, quite certainly," said she. "You mean—" "I mean that without knowing it we have been tramping on the most sacred conceptions of the little folks. We who are royal are a class apart. We are worshipped prisoners, processional toys. We pay for worship by losing our elementary freedom. And I was to have married that prince. You know nothing of him, though. Well, a pygmy prince. He doesn't matter. It seems it would have strengthened the bonds between my country and another, and this country also was to profit. Imagine it, strengthening the bonds. And now they want me to go on with it, as though there was nothing between us two. Nothing? Yes, but that isn't all. He said—" "You're a specialist in tact?" "Yes. He said it would be better for you, better for all the giants, if we two abstained from conversation. That was how he put it." "But what can they do if we don't?" "He said you might have your freedom." "I?" He said, with a stress, "My dear young lady, it would be better, it would be more dignified, if you parted willingly. That was all he said, with a stress on willingly." "But—" What business is it of these little wretches where